Human civilization is developing successfully. In 2015, the first lunar colonies were built on the Moon, and in 2032, the first mining operations begin on Mars. In 2040, the newest spacecraft, Event Horizon, goes to explore the boundaries of the solar system and disappears behind the planet Neptune. 7 years have passed. Dr. William Weir wakes up from a nightmare, the sight of a wrecked ship and the dead bodies of spacemen. On his table is a collection of photographs of a young woman named Claire, whom he misses. Having cleaned himself up, the man goes on board the rescue spacecraft Lewis and Clark, which is sent on a secret mission. However, the astronauts themselves do not understand what could be secret on Neptune. The captain gives final orders, and the crew prepares for sleep in stasis. Other doctors examine him. He is injected with a substance that helps the body cope with overloads, and the capsule closes. It takes 56 days on the road, and one day Weir hears his name through the dream and wakes up. He gets out of the capsule and looks around. All the crew members are asleep, but the voice continues to sound. He goes out to the control room, sees a woman in the pilot seat, and recognizes his Claire. But at this moment she opens her eyes with empty sockets. He starts screaming, and it turns out that he's dreaming this nightmare, and he's still locked in the capsule. The crew doctors release the man and make fun of him. This happens to everyone on their first time. Weir goes to the bridge, where the entire crew is already gathering. Lieutenant Peters is watching video footage with her young son, and noticing this, Captain Miller apologizes to the woman. He tried to find a replacement for her, but the deadlines were too short. Then he introduces the doctor to the team. Senior Assistant Stark, Justin is a service engineer, funny guy Cooper, jack of all trades, Peters is a medic, the pilot is Smith, DJ is a doctor. Weir says that a signal was recently received from the ship Event Horizon that disappeared 7 years ago. In fact, the ship is a secret government project capable of making long-distance flights at super light speed. The crew members take the doctor's words skeptically, because according to the theory of relativity, this is impossible. Weir explains that the theory of relativity can be circumvented. By asking provocative questions about the closest distance between 2 points, he clearly demonstrates that by folding space, it is possible to make this distance zero. The Event Horizon engine creates an artificial black hole and uses its enormous energy to warp space-time in such a way that the starting and ending points of the journey overlap. After that, the ship passes through the formed spatial tunnel. Then the space unfolds back and takes its former shape. This is called the gravity mode, and it was created by Weir. The ship was supposed to move to Proxima Centauri, the star nearest to the Sun, but it went missing. And now a signal has come, from which they managed to extract some information. And these are heart-rending screams, with a phrase repeated by the captain's voice, which DJ deciphers as "Liberate me," which means "help me" in Latin. At this moment, signals begin to sound, informing about the approach to the ship Event Horizon, but it is completely invisible in the upper atmosphere. Nevertheless, Smith manages to moor to the ship that suddenly comes into view, and its appearance surprises the crew. The ship is huge and has an unusual shape. Stark conducts a bioscan of the ship, but the instruments show a complete absence of life, as well as icy cold temperatures inside. A research team is dispatched to the ship, while the doctor directs rescuers through comms. The ship meets the explorers with a void in which all kinds of objects float. None of the crew members are visible. Justin goes to inspect the gravity engine, then Peters and Captain go to the front of the ship. Along the way, the people find strange devices that turn out to be mines, which, if necessary, can tear off the front part of the ship and turn it into a lifeboat. The captain is examining the med bay, but everything is in perfect order. Suddenly, a part of a man's hand hits the captain's helmet, but he does not show his fear and goes on. At this time, Justin goes to the engine, to which a strange tunnel of rotating parts leads, which reminds the pilot of a meat grinder. In the meantime, Peters inspects the bridge and finds bloody footprints. While she's trying to get the disc with the logbook, a frozen corpse floats up to her. People can't understand what could have disfigured the body so much. The eyes seem to have been torn out, which could not have been the result of an explosion. Meanwhile, Justin scans the core he found, the center of the gravitational system, and accidentally activates it, which causes it to become liquid and the mechanic is pulled inside. And at this moment, a sudden explosion damages Lewis and Clark, and it begins to lose oxygen. Justin manages to get out of the core, but the guy falls into a comatose state. Captain Miller has no choice but to transfer his entire crew to the empty Event Horizon for the duration of the repair. However, it will have enough oxygen for no more than 20 hours. Peters manages to turn on gravity on the horizon, and Stark checks the ship's systems. No means of communication have survived, so it is impossible to hope for salvation from the outside. At this time, Smith inspects the damaged ship and finds a huge hole. The others, looking at the bloody footprints, are trying to understand what happened on the ship. Meanwhile, doctors examine Justin, but he does not react to anything. Cooper says that he pulled the guy out of the liquid core, but Weir ridicules him. This is simply impossible, because it would mean that the gate was open. But the gravity was turned off. There is a scuffle between the men, and the captain demands an explanation. The doctor tries to give answers. The core is 3 magnetic rings that create a black hole through which the ship moves to any point in space. The captain orders to close the entrance to this room. Meanwhile, Peters is examining the ship's log entries and suddenly hears a sound in the sickbay. The woman arms herself with a cleaver and examines the room. Suddenly, she sees movement under the cover of the medical table. She prepares to strike but looks inside. It's her son, whose legs seem to have been eaten by someone. Peters screams in horror, but DJ brings her to her senses. The table is empty. Later, she shows the decrypted data from the log, and the captain of the Horizon does say a phrase in Latin, but it sounds like hello and goodbye, after which everything disappears. At this moment, a rapid outflow of energy begins, and the doctor understands the core has started working. But why? He and the captain hurry to him, and Weir descends into one of the working tunnels. At this time, Justin, waking up, talks about the darkness that is already coming. Weir finds a short circuit, but hears his wife's voice again. The space around him begins to visually change, which leads to fright. The man tries to call the captain for help and sees Claire without eyes, who calls to him to stay with her. At the same time, the captain sees a burnt man coming out of the liquid surrounding the core. Later, having gathered together, the crew discusses their visions. Smith is sure that the ship is simply cursed. DJ stops his tantrum with a scalpel, and the captain sends Smith and Cooper to repair their ship. After that, Stark tries to explain to the captain that the ship somehow reacts to people as if it was a living creature. At this time, Justin regains consciousness and tries to commit suicide by going into outer space without a spacesuit. People try to persuade the guy to come back, but he talks about the darkness inside him and opens the door. The guy comes to his senses for a second, not understanding what happened. And then Miller miraculously saves him by pushing him back into the airlock. Medics are rushing to help. The crippled Justin is immersed in a pressure chamber. The captain orders to activate all the possibilities. There is 4 hours of air left, and they need to find out what happened to the first crew before it happens to them. Stark remembers Justin's words about the darkness inside him, but Weir can't explain these words and just leaves the bridge. The captain catches up with him. He must know what's going on. It was Weir who built the ship, and he should know where the gates open and where the ship has been for the last 7 years. But he can't say anything definite. The captain leaves, but in the passage he begins to hear the voice of his boatswain, who died on the ship that Miller previously commanded. Back then, there was an explosion of the oxygen tanks, and only 4 crew members managed to escape. The boatswain was shouting, but Miller couldn't do anything for him. After that, he swore that he would not lose a single crew member. It turns out that the ship knows the fears and secrets of each of them, and it brings them out to the surface. And then DJ admits that he made a mistake in translating a Latin phrase. In fact, it sounds like "save yourself from hell." It turns out that the ship has been outside the universe and reality, and it is unknown what it saw and what it brought with him. At this moment, Cooper reports that the ship is repaired and they can get out of there. The last finishing touches remain. Peters finally manages to open the logbook, and the last shots terrify the people. It turns out that after activating the engine, the members of the Event Horizon crew fell into a frenzy of torture, cannibalism, and violence. People started killing each other in the most sophisticated ways. Miller orders the remaining crew to return to the repaired Lewis and Clark, intending to shoot the Event Horizon with missiles after departure. Weir strongly disagrees with him because the ship has become alive and will not let anyone leave. The crew gathers the necessary things for the return, but Weir refuses to return because he's already at home. At the last moment, Peter suddenly sees the figure of her son, who runs away from her. The woman rushes after him and climbs the high bridge. And when the boy smiles at her, she steps toward him and falls from a great height, crashing against the foot of the core. Dr. Weir finds her body. At this moment, he sees another vision of his own wife, Claire, who killed herself in the bathroom. This finally drives him crazy. He squeezes out his eyes, thus responding to his wife's call to join. He becomes possessed by a madman, a living embodiment of evil who settled on the ill-fated ship. Meanwhile, Cooper finishes repairing the ship, and Smith sees Weir leaving for the Event Horizon. He reports to the captain that the doctor has just recently been on Lewis and Clark. Miller discovers the missing explosives from the Event Horizon corridor and orders Smith to leave the ship. But the pilot does not have time to do this. Lewis and Clark explodes. Smith is instantly killed, and Lieutenant Cooper, who is on the skin of the ship, is thrown into space. The man comes up with a way to return to the ship. He needs to puncture his oxygen tank and thus direct himself to the Event Horizon. Miller warns DJ, working in the medbay, about the danger coming from the Weir, but he does not have time to do anything. The blind Weir disarms him and opens him alive. Miller, who breaks into the sickbay, finds only the mutilated body of the assistant. The enraged captain finds a pneumatic hammer. If Weir does not want to leave his ship, he will stay here. He sets out to track the madman and finds an insensitive Stark. After bringing the woman to her senses, he sees Weir in the captain's chair. Weir admits that he created the Event Horizon to reach the stars. But he went further and got into another universe, a dimension of true chaos and pure evil. And when the ship returned, it became alive. It is beautiful, despite the fact that it destroyed his crew. Weir is ready to show where the ship was, after which he starts the gravity engine, intending to send the Event Horizon on a new journey again. At this moment, Stark attacks Weir, but Weir throws the woman away and grabs Miller's pneumatic hammer. The captain warns that he may break through the shell, but the doctor is not afraid. Meanwhile, Cooper returns to the ship, flies up to the bridge and tries to contact someone inside. Weir fires back at the bridge porthole. The bridge becomes to decompress, and the doctor is thrown into space. The captain somehow miraculously manages to get back into the ship, and at the last moment drags Stark inside. At this moment, a signal is heard from the bow lock. People are arming themselves. It can be Weir, but they cannot take any risks. Fortunately, it turns out to be Cooper. But despite the death of the doctor, nothing is over yet because the core is activated. Miller decides to blow up the corridor and hide in the wheelhouse. To do this, they will prepare the tanks and plunge into stasis, first sending signals of rescue. The captain goes to fulfill the plans, hearing warnings about the opening of the gate. And Cooper, having turned on the emergency beacon, suddenly sees streams of blood filling the ship. He barely manages to help Stark, and he rushes to the bow. Captain Miller prepares to activate the explosives on the bridge, but the vision of the burning boatswain drives him into the engine room. And suddenly, the image of the boatswain is replaced by triumphant Weir returned by the ship. He shows Miller the dimension of chaos, saying that hell is just a word and reality is much worse, and he will show the captain everything. Terrible visions of his crew flash before Miller's eyes, and he gets into a fight with the doctor. But evil cannot be defeated, and only at the last moment he manages to detonate the explosives, dividing the ship. After a few seconds, the tail section with Weir and Miller falls into the resulting funnel, and the front section with the 3 surviving crew members, Cooper, Stark, and Justin, immersed in suspended animation, remains in our universe in the orbit of Neptune. Cooper and Stark say goodbye to the captain and are placed in pressure chambers, waiting for rescuers. After 72 days, a second rescue team appears on the ship. Stark is the first to come out of suspended animation and joyfully welcomes people from Earth and asks where Cooper and Justin are. However, under the lifeguard's helmet, she again sees the scarred, disfigured but still triumphant face of Dr. Weir. Stark is terrified by a monstrous vision. Cooper and the lifeguard try to calm her down, repeating that everything terrible is over. But then the airlock door closes, leaving the finale of the film open. There are certain failures in the film, outright nonsense in the vision of the future and scientific discoveries. But the philosophical question is by no means ridiculous. Where are mankind's new discoveries leading? And who knows what's beyond the horizon?